Anybody heard from John Bolton today?
I haven't. Have you?
No, I just wonder if he's going to keep working there.
I don't know. I would think he woun't be especially happy about this.
Speaking he's been dreaming about hitting the Iranians since Fluff was a kitten. She's a full-grown cat.
Is that a Mississippi expression?
I think it's mine, but the fact remains, it's been one of his primary objectives since long before he worked here. I mean, that's the top of the John Bolton list, strike Iran. He got close. He got 10 minutes from there last night.
Here's the one thing. I mean, let's just talk about this sensibly. On the one hand, a lot of us are saying, well, why didn't you strike? But on the other hand, a lot of us, if he had struck, would have said, well, should he have done that? So,
not passing judgment on anything that he did or did not do, only pointing out that the explanation, just as you said, doesn't make sense. 10 minutes before a planned strike on Iran, the president asked how many people would die and called it off. That's the president's explanation for why he decided not to retaliate for the Iranian takedown of an American drone. The president spoke today with NBC's Chuck Todd.
They said, came back, said, sir, approximately 150. And I thought about it for a second, and I said, you know what? They shot down an unmanned drone, plane, whatever you want to call it. And here we are sitting with 150 dead people. That would have taken place probably within a half an hour after I said go ahead. Yeah. And I didn't like it. I didn't think it was proportionate.
The president also said he never gave a final order for the operation and that U.S. military planes were not yet in the air, but that they would have been pretty soon. President Trump appears to have softened his tone toward Iran and Tehran in the latest round of escalation between the two countries. Iranian officials claim they gave several warnings before shooting down the U.S. drone, which they say was in their airspace. Pentagon officials say that is not true. They report it was an unprovoked attack and that the drone was at least 20 miles from Iranian airspace when it went down. Pentagon officials say this was a deliberate act from Tehran aimed at interfering with the U.S. surveillance in the region. We have Team Fox coverage. Hillary Vaughn reporting from Capitol Hill with lawmakers' reaction. First to Rich Edson reporting live from the White House. Rich?
Shep, it is still unclear how, when, or if the administration is going to eventually respond to this attack on a U.S. drone yesterday and what the administration says is international waters. More on that conversation that the president had on NBC News, in which he details a little bit more about the hesitation he had about going forward with this attack.
Never gave a final order.
No. But we had something ready to go subject to my approval. And they came in, and they came in about a half an hour before. They said, sir, we're about ready to go. I said, I want a better
planes
definition.
In the air? Were planes in the air?
We're about ready to go.
Yeah?
No, but they would have been pretty soon. And things would have happened to a point where you wouldn't turn back or couldn't turn back.
The administration is still stressing this all happened over international waters, though the Iranian government is saying that the aircraft did breach their territory, Shep.
And the administration is coordinating with the Saudis.
That's right. The White House says that President Trump spoke with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, about all of this today. This is why while the United States' Iran envoy, Brian Hook, is traveling in Saudi Arabia today. He says that the U.S. will maintain its pressure campaign and that diplomacy does not give Iran the right to respond with military force, that Iran needs to meet diplomacy with diplomacy and not military force. Last month, the Trump administration withdrew from the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement, restored substantial sanctions against Iran's economy, targeting its top exports, in particular oil. Since then, the U.S. has really seen an uptick over the last couple of months, month and a half or so, according to U.S. officials, in Iranian threats and activity in the region. Iran says it is also less than a week away from stockpiling enough uranium to violate the limits that are included in the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. So this is all ongoing now as the United States is seeing this increase in tension in the region. The Iranian government claims that the U.S. maximum pressure and sanctions campaign is essentially an assault against them, and that response is happening across the region. There's also a movement at the UN Security Council, according to a diplomat there, that the United States has requested a meeting at the council on Monday, closed door, to discuss all of this. Shep?
Rich Edson at the White House. Rich, thank you. The House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, the second in line to the presidency, was not made aware of the U.S. plans to strike Iran, so says her spokesperson. Fox Business Network's Hillary Vaughn continues Team Fox coverage live on Capitol Hill. Hillary?
Shepard, Democrats on Capitol Hill are breathing a sigh of relief that the president decided not to go through with these attacks at the very last minute. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wants the president to take a deep breath and de-escalate this situation with Iran. Pelosi releasing this statement today saying, quote, during our meeting with the president at the White House, congressional leaders stressed the necessity that we work with our allies and not strengthen the hand of Iran's hardliners. Democratic leaders emphasized that hostilities must not be initiated without the approval of Congress. House Armed Services Committee Chairman Adam Smith says the president's decision to ditch the strike at the last minute and then tweet a play-by-play about it sends the message to our adversaries that the president is indecisive.
It's not the kind of thing you should say publicly when you're trying to show that you have a clear path, a clear plan, and the resolve to follow through on that plan. You had to know this is how Iran was going to react. Once they reacted, what were you planning on doing? And I think the answer is they weren't sure, and that's problematic.
The one thing that Democrats in the House and the Senate want to make sure the president knows that Congress ultimately has the decision if there is any military action taken against Iran. So yesterday, 3 Democratic senators sitting on the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee stood on the Senate floor yesterday pushing for an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act that would stop the president specifically from using any money for any military action against Iran without Congress signing off on it first. Shep?
Hey, what are you hearing from Republicans? Are they of one voice today, or are there differing opinions?
There are differing opinions, and a lot of people are chiming in. House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy on Fox and Friends this morning saying he's not judging the president for his last-minute decision to call off the strike, saying he thinks the president has a larger goal in mind.
I think the instance of what I saw yesterday, they are well prepared. They're composed of what they're going to do. It's going to be measured, but that it's all within the basis of getting the ultimate goal that Iran can never achieve a nuclear weapon.
But not every Republican agrees. GOP Congressman Adam Kinzinger in a Fox News radio interview saying he's not happy about the decision by the administration to make a last-minute change of plan. He says that he thinks it could potentially make the president look weak. He also said that if there is no U.S. response to Iran hitting this drone down, he thinks that will ultimately be a hit on the president's credibility. Shepard?
Hillary Vaughn with Team Fox coverage. Thanks. More on the back and forth ahead and the explanation for what happened here with Chris Wallace next. Back to the top story of the day, the president's last-minute cancellation of a planned strike on Iran. Chris Wallace is here for our Friday chat. It's nice to see you, sir.
Good to be with you.
It is Fox News reporting that 11 o'clock yesterday morning there was a national security briefing. The president was not in it. It's Fox News reporting that at 3 o'clock there was another briefing during which the president would have been given the details of the strike, including a casualty count. It's our reporting that he was said to have had concerns after that briefing about the casualty count, that he then spent some time on the phone, and that during the 6 o'clock hour or whenever it was, 10 minutes before go, he called it off because of the 150 that he had just learned about. Something's wrong there.
Yeah, I talked to a former top national security official in an earlier Republican administration who says this just doesn't add up, that if when the president meets with his top Pentagon people, they give him a very thorough list, a menu of targets, and say you can hit this target, you can hit that target. If you do, here are the possible casualties. They run through the whole thing. This is a routine thing that the military does in these kinds of situations. And it is at that point that a president would have been fully briefed by the generals as to if you hit target A, here are the dangers, or here's the possible collateral damage. So the idea that the president 10 minutes before the actual go, and again, the New York Times is reporting that the ships were in place, that the airplanes, the warplanes were in the air, that 10 minutes before you're learning for the first time that there were going to be 150 casualties seems pretty unlikely, and certainly not the way it's been done in the past.
How is this different from President Obama pulling back from the red line in Syria?
Well, it's a question you have to ask yourself. And first you ask yourself, if what happened yesterday had happened under President Obama, where the president gives the order to strike, that the planes are in the air, and 10 minutes before he pulls them back, what would have been the reaction from Republicans and probably from some Democrats as well? And you don't have to entirely guess, because we know, and it wasn't nearly this much of a hair trigger, where President Obama set the red line back in 2012 and said if Bashar al-Assad, the dictator in Syria, had another chemical weapons attack, that would be the red line, the trigger for military action. But before he had actually ordered it, he pulled back and he got hammered. President Obama got hammered, and one of the people he got hammered by was Donald Trump, who as recently as 2017 as president said that this sent a signal of weakness not only to Syria, but around the world, about what American resolve is and about what the word of the president meant. And now we have this happening by President Trump on his watch.
Does this impact the United States' ability to deter Iran?
Well, I think it depends. First of all, we don't know that there might not be another strike tonight or tomorrow or whenever. And the U.S. obviously still has enormous capabilities. But you do have to think to yourself that the president had talked about getting tough. A lot of people had talked, not the president, about taking action after the mining of those 2 tankers in the Gulf of Oman last week. Here is a U.S. asset, a U.S. drone, a $130 billion plane that is shot down. And, you don't have to level Tehran. You can, according to the New York Times, take out some radar batteries, take out some missiles installations. And in the middle of the night, I can't imagine there would have been 150 people around them. And the president, at the last minute, decided not to do that. So it does send a signal. On the other hand, the U.S. is still the U.S. and still has enormous assets in the region. So I don't think that the mullahs in Iran think that they have an absolutely green light to do anything they want.
There's a pattern here with North Korea, with Venezuela, and now in continuing the pattern with Iran. He uses the military as a negotiating chit, and then the adversary waits him out.
Well, you have a real conflict here between the president, because the president does talk tough, and he has used force. He has used cruise missiles at least twice
in Syria
to go after Syria and Bashar al-Assad after the use of chemical weapons. And the first time he did it back in April of 2017, the point was made he was going to enforce the red line that Barack Obama did not. But on the other hand, for all of the talk of that, the president campaigned on and seems to not want to get the U.S. into more endless wars. And I don't know if it would be endless, but a conflict, a serious armed conflict with Iran would be a really ugly and prolonged battle. There's no way you get out of that easily. On the other hand, as we saw with Ronald Reagan in the 80s with the Kuwaiti tankers, you can, hit a radar installation or hit a missile battery, and that doesn't mean you're in a war. It just means you've blown something up and you've responded.
Anybody heard from John Bolton today?
I haven't. Have you?
No. I just wonder if he's going to keep working there.
I don't know. I would think he wouldn't be especially happy about this.
Speaking he's been dreaming about hitting the Iranians since Fluff was a kitten. She's a full-grown cat.
Is that a Mississippi expression?
I think it's mine, but the fact remains, it's been one of his primary objectives since long before he worked here. I mean, that's the top of the John Bolton list: strike Iran. He got close. He got 10 minutes from there last night.
Here's the one thing. Let's just talk about this sensibly. On the one hand, a lot of us are saying, well, why didn't you strike? But on the other hand, a lot of us, if he had struck, would have said, well, should he have done that? So,
not passing judgment on anything that he did or did not do, only pointing out that the explanation, just as you said, doesn't make sense.
It doesn't hold together. The timeline for when he learned information and when he decided to act doesn't make a lot of sense. And in a sense, maybe that's the biggest problem. You could argue, if you don't want to strike, don't strike. If you want to strike, do strike. But don't send mixed messages that confuse not only your enemies, but even your allies and people here in this country as to what you're going to do.
And then tweet out the whole thought process of American foreign policy and intervention.
Well,
that's an observation, not a critique. I'm looking forward to the program this weekend, Chris.
All right.
What-
Yes, I am too, particularly because we're going to have Tom Cotton on. Tom Cotton, senator from Arkansas, a real hardliner in Iran. And even after the tankers, he said that it needed a military response. So I'm going to be very curious to hear what he has to say about. And of course, we don't know. In 48 hours from now, when Fox News Sunday comes on the air, perhaps we will have taken military action. So we'll talk to Tom Cotton about all that.
All right, Chris. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.